Tonight, I'm excited to be bringing you this video because this is a continuation of the talk that I have going on regarding my school experience, high school experience, and I'm just ready to be done with this chapter so that I can move on to other things that matter. But at the same time, I'm really obsessed about talking about school. As you guys know, I had aspired to be a teacher. Today, I happened to have a conversation with someone who is a teacher, and she pretty much agreed with me on my perspective as to why I got turned off by the idea of becoming a teacher. Anyways, I remembered that when I was on vacation from my senior year, I was writing down on a journal the stuff that I had jotted down on my iPod notes app, and it was a friend's idea. He was like, "You like to journal, right? Write this memory down," because this was hilarious. I am so happy to have taken his advice on that because now I have this document and I can share it with you guys. I still gotta dwell on each grade level separately, but on this video, I just want to go over the positive, funny moments that I got to write down and that at the moment I can recall. Let's get started. I have a memory from Algebra 1. The teacher who I had was a crazy ass woman. I remember my brother telling me she was the one who flunked me and made me take tech math. If you don't know what tech math is, it's pretty much the math class that goes as easy and basic and low as it can get. It's not the core class and it's not that challenging. It's kind of to make it up to you. Like if you're a slow student with the math subject, you take tech class. I didn't have to take that, fortunately. And honestly, I feel like if my brother had to take tech math, it was more of a language barrier more than anything. I just thought it was hilarious because I'm like, oh, thanks. Here I am struggling about my high school confidence, and here you are giving me the most excellent and optimal start about one of the subjects that I have always struggled with, which is math. Some other classmates that I had already had an advantage over me, which was they had taken pre-algebra. So it's like they are already on geometry. Some people were taking geometry by the time they were on 9th grade, and I felt like I was doing my life so wrong. Anyways, the funny memory I have about Algebra 1 is that this teacher was teaching about horizontal and vertical lines. I forget what the concept was, but I just remember that she shouted, "Hoy!" Hoy! All of a sudden. This was the very first class that I had in the mornings that semester, so that shit woke me up. And everybody else was also up in the classroom. So that was the good thing about her. She had this energy to her, and she was like in her 40s already, or maybe starting her 50s, I don't know, but she was up there. I believe that she was saying this about the point when you have X with a slope of 0 and the line is horizontal and crosses Y but never X. So that's why it's called Hoy, for horizontal Y. And you know, it's one of those mnemonics, I guess, that teachers create to help students remember stuff. And this was a class that had like an end of course test, so it was important that we retained as much as we could. I only remember that one, Hoy. I don't remember what the saying for Y was, or if she even had one, so that's why I'm not even going to mention it. I don't have any record of it written here. She had this like funny voice. She was like, you know, "Hoy!" like really loud. It's one of those things that you just have to be there and perceive it for yourself, and then you'll find it funny. But everybody in the classroom laughed. Other days, whenever we had a false perception or a wrong answer, she would make the sound like that goes off when time is up, that buzzing sound. but I think that's what it was. She also had like a kind of a messed up way of speaking. She would say supposedly instead of supposedly, and she would say it ain't purty about why you want to rewrite some equations to make it easier to work with. So she would go like, it ain't purty. And sometimes as she taught and wrote on the board, she had like some dance moves to go along with it. She had a really good spirit and a really good energy, but that didn't always mean that her teaching technique was reaching everybody, because sometimes I would be confused and I needed to go to tutoring. From time to time, you know, she could accommodate you and help you and all that, but I found it useful to go to another teacher to get help. My experience with her as the semester progressed, she was a great teacher, crazy, but she had her good stuff. This is one good memory. I was taking Music Theory 1, and I never knew exactly what was going on during this class, but I know that when a group of kids are giggling, they are mocking something or somebody. Maybe it was me. But anyway, there was this boy, and then two other guys, two other girls, and then myself. And we kept laughing and giggling incessantly. And suddenly, the peak of the joke is reached. And that was when one of the boys' nose played a number on him, like, you know, stuff came out. And like, you know, he turned to the side and it was hanging and whatever. So then he like sniffed as hard as he could, and it grossly went back into his nose, right? But you know, that fluid that keeps particles and other stuff from being ingested nasally just dripped down. It was terrible. You know, I saw it all, but it's just, it had my stomach contracting for like an hour. I don't even remember what the joke was, but that is the most vivid memory that I have about this incident. On another occasion, that same boy was talking to another girl. He made a drama out of middle C on the piano. Whenever the teacher asked or showed middle C on the piano, he would make like a sound effect of it exploding, like middle C class. Boom! You know, so I don't know if he got that from a movie or something, but I just thought that his impression of it was pretty hilarious. Then at another time, I remember that our teacher was telling us a story about her college classes, and since the professors lecture during college, the students literally have to be writing everything that the professor says, because you are more than likely going to see that on an exam. So you really want to make sure that whatever your notes have is good study material. Well, my teacher was saying that one of her classmates was literally screaming, "Hold on, wait, my pencil's on fire." They were taking notes on a subject that's really complex, and then the teacher must have been speaking either too fast or just not making a lot of pauses, so I can understand why that would make it difficult. And then this next other story is one of my favorite things ever said. There was this boy, that same boy was calling another boy whose name was Joey. And what I loved the most was he would say the name Joey with a really funny voice. It was like, Joey, Joey, something like that. And then at another time, he was telling another boy, but it was like, hey, boy, get Joey. And I just loved it, because now every time I see the name Joey, I say it like that. I'm like, Joey. Also, the look that he had on his face was priceless. He would be like, Joey, Joey, so and so, get Joey. It was hysterical. Another thing that this guy would say a lot was he had like this really deep voice and like sounded like a monster, and he would go like, my name is the Beast, like the Beast, something like that. I can't even recreate it, and if I were to try to recreate it, I would probably mess up my throat really bad, and not in a good way. But yeah, this class was awesome. That's where I made some of my best memories ever. Although I knew how to do almost every assignment, I didn't know how to put it to practice. That's the thing about music theory. You're learning music, but not really hands on, not with an instrument. So a lot of the times I was like, "Oh, what does this mean?" So until the teacher would show us what it meant on the instrument, I wouldn't know. I felt like I wasn't learning. I was learning, but I just didn't know how to make it practical. And that was kind of frustrating for me. It took me waiting until senior year to take a course to finally realize, oh yeah, that's what I was learning in music theory. Overall, that class was full of very good people. I met new people, and then some folks who I have known since middle school were there and we were tight, so it was a pretty good experience. All right, now moving on to earth science. I had a classmate who was a girl who I had met in 7th grade, and we were pretty tight up until our graduation from high school. And she had moved for a period of time after middle school, and so we were apart, but we would still email. But she had told me that she was coming back. So I was pretty excited about that. And I told her, look, this is what my schedule looks like. You should really try to get earth science with me. I'm sure they would give it to you because the class is kind of empty. So, anyways, she was so bored in that class that every time our teacher would say something, she had written on her hand with a Sharpie, in bed. So every single sentence that he finished, she sat in front of me and she would hold her hand up like kind of secretly. She would go like that and be like, her hand red in bed. So she would just show it all the time. It just made me giggle so much because I'm like, you're crazy. Another time, there was this boy who was like, did you steal my nuts? And then, of course, this girl, she was like, because she, of course, interpreted that in a dirty way. I'll just never forget her eyes. They were so wide open. Like, I thought that they were going to fall out of her sockets and I was going to have to, jam them back in. I saw another time that that girl was looking back my way, nodding, then turning around, and then did the same thing, turned, nodded, and then looked forward. And then behind me, there was a guy who she had dated at some point. I turn around and I see him and he's shaking his head. So, like, by the third round, she had nodded, and then that's when I'm like, hold on. And I turned around and he was shaking his head. So then for the fourth round that this happened, she nodded, I shook my head, and then that boy started going like like that, like he was trying to do both things at the same time. I just started giggling because I thought that was pretty fun. One day, as usual, this girl and I were giggling and giggling and giggling while the teacher went over the lesson. And the thing about earth science is that, you guys know, since I have loved science so much, I was pretty much ahead in this class. I already knew, or I had already studied this in my own free time or over the summer or in middle school. So a lot of the information wasn't really that new to me. So I could afford to be distracted in class. I forget what she was doing, but there came a point in which, actually, thanks to me, the teacher was like saying about my friend, would you please stop it? And then she goes, I'm not doing anything. And then I make, for that instance, I'm keeping my face as serious as I can, but I was losing it inside of me. Like, my stomach just kept jumping. I just froze. And then she looked at me and I shot her a kind of a, I'm sorry gaze. And she just smiled and shook her head. And I put my head down and giggled even more. So I don't know if the teacher ever realized that I was actually the one making the noise, but I was never giving any trouble. I never gave any trouble. I was like the highest grade in the class, so I'm sure that the teacher wasn't going to suspect me. Day after day, my teacher would say that he would make things more better. So one day I go like, nice English, Mr. His name. And then he said, thanks, I've been working on it. And that made me laugh so much because I was actually saying that your English is terrible, but then you're actually like, I've been working on it, which is hilarious because it goes hand in hand with my joke. He's like, yeah, I'm acknowledging that I suck at it. Anyways, and then one day he received a call at the classroom and he picked it up and he exchanged some phrases over the phone, and then at some point toward the end of his conversation he was like, meet me behind the buses. So of course my friend who I keep telling you about, you can figure out what she turned that into. That became our phrase for the years to come. And I don't know why, but she kept making it seem like our teacher was like, swinging in a weird way. So I also remember that this teacher was explaining something, and I'm guessing it had to do with like scarce resources. And I believe that somebody asked some kind of a question. And what I remember my teacher saying was, you take a mommy sheep, a daddy sheep, let them spend the night together, you get more sheep. I remember that my friend and I just giggled at the way he said it, and then he looked in our direction and he was like, yeah, that's how you do it, is it not? This class was definitely one of my favorites in school. I learned about geology, which had been one of my favorite topics, and it wasn't quite a geology class, but because we actually had a geology course, but because not a lot of people signed up for it, we couldn't have the class. I don't remember what these two were talking about, but this friend that I had in earth science had a guy that she was seeing, and then they were talking about something. And I remember that at some point they were arguing. She would say no, and he would say yes. So they kept this going for like 5 minutes straight. No, yes, no, yes, and this and that. And then at some point, like the guy had like a screamo type of effect going, like yes. And I just remember that was just hilarious. And what I remember about this guy was that he had such a great vocal range. Like, he could make the funniest of sounds. One time, there was this girl who was kind of a bully. So, anytime he would see her, he would go like, oh, it's a beautiful day, like really over dramatic. This is just stuff that you had to be there and see it so that you understand that it's funny, because now it's like, you don't know who I'm talking about, you don't know how they sound like, and then my projection is not very good, so you may not find this as funny, but it's just I have such good memories having been in school. That concludes my memories from freshman year that I remember were funny. What are some of your funny experiences in school? I just wanted to portray the kind of chemistry that I had with the classmates who I was tight with, friends with, and the crazy stuff we would do. Normally, I wouldn't initiate any of the jokes or any of the silliness because I took school very seriously. But some folks out there acted like they didn't care, but they still made good grades. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you soon.